In the late 20th century, Ethiopia experienced political purges, internal repression, and prolonged instability under a military regime. During years of revolutionary upheaval, entire communities were affected by state violence, forced policies, and sustained humanitarian crisis. Urban crackdowns and the Red Terror campaigns targeted perceived opponents, while famine conditions and economic disruption deepened the national emergency. Historians estimate policies under this regime contributed to about 500,000 to 1 million deaths through executions, famine-related conditions, and political repression. Number 10. Mengistu Haile Mariam. In the mid to late 20th century, North Korea became one of the most isolated and tightly controlled states in the world, under a centralized ideological system. State policies shaped agriculture, industry, and daily life through rigid political control and enforced economic structure. Periods of severe food shortages combined with systemic repression and long-term economic mismanagement placed immense strain on the civilian population across decades of rule. Historians estimate policies under this leadership contributed to about 1 to 3 million deaths through famine-related conditions, political repression, and prolonged economic hardship. Number 9. Kim Il-sung. Cambodia was forcibly transformed into an extreme agrarian society under a radical revolutionary regime that abolished cities, currency, religion, and formal institutions. Millions were driven from urban centers into rural labor zones under rigid ideological control. Forced relocations, starvation, disease, and mass executions became widespread as the regime attempted to reshape the nation through total social engineering and agricultural collectivization. Historians estimate policies under this leadership contributed to about 1.5 to 2 million deaths through forced labor, executions, famine, and systemic repression. Number 8. Pol Pot. During the Second World War, Imperial Japan expanded rapidly across East Asia and the Pacific under a militarized government focused on total war mobilization and imperial conquest. Civilian populations across occupied territories faced occupation, violence, forced labor, and widespread wartime atrocities. Military campaigns prolonged conflict across multiple regions, while occupation policies contributed to mass suffering, displacement, and large-scale loss of life throughout the Asia-Pacific theater. Historians estimate wartime actions and policies under this leadership contributed to several million deaths through military operations, occupation, violence, forced labor, and wartime atrocities. Number 7. Hideki Tojo. In the late 19th century, vast areas of the Congo were transformed into extraction zones under a brutal colonial system built around rubber production and forced labor. Villages were depopulated, communities disrupted, and entire regions placed under violent economic control. Local populations were subjected to quotas, coercion, and harsh punishments designed to maximize resource output for a private colonial regime operating in Central Africa. Historians estimate this system contributed to about 8 to 10 million deaths through forced labor, famine, disease, and systemic violence. Number 6. King Leopold II of Belgium. In the late 14th century, vast regions across Central Asia, Persia, and the Middle East faced repeated sieges and destruction. Cities that resisted were deliberately devastated to eliminate future resistance. A conqueror of Turco-Mongol heritage rose within the political legacy of the Mongol Empire, modeling his campaigns on rapid conquest, mobility, and psychological warfare across multiple empires. His campaigns stretched from Transoxiana to India and Anatolia, defined by swift military expansion and deliberate city destruction. Historians estimate his campaigns contributed to about 10 to 17 million deaths through warfare, sieges, and large-scale urban destruction. Number 5. Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane. During the early to mid-20th century, the Soviet Union underwent forced collectivization, rapid industrialization, and centralized authoritarian control across vast territories. Agricultural policies and state planning reshaped rural life, while strict political oversight governed economic and social systems. Political purges, mass arrests, forced labor camps, and famine-related crises placed immense strain on the population as repression targeted perceived opponents and dissent across multiple regions. Historians estimate policies and actions under this leadership contributed to about 15 to 20 million deaths through purges, forced labor, famine-related conditions, and political repression. Number 4. Joseph Stalin. During the mid-20th century, Europe was placed under a totalitarian regime driven by expansionist ideology, centralized control, and racial policy, enforced across occupied territories. Civil institutions were dismantled, while state power was used to direct warfare, repression, and systematic persecution on an industrial scale. Occupation systems, concentration camps, forced labor programs, and state-directed violence affected millions across multiple regions as the regime pursued territorial expansion and ideological objectives. Historians estimate policies and actions under this leadership contributed to about 17 to over 20 million deaths, including genocide, wartime atrocities, and civilian losses directly tied to the regime's rule. Number 3. Adolf Hitler. Across the 13th century Eurasian world, entire cities were reduced to silence as Mongol campaigns reshaped the landscape of civilization. Urban centers fell, populations collapsed, and trade routes were violently redefined through sustained conquest and siege warfare. Under a unified Mongol command structure, highly mobile cavalry forces expanded rapidly across Central Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. Military strategy emphasized speed, coordination, and the systematic destruction of resisting cities. Historians estimate that the conquests associated with this empire contributed to approximately 20 to 40 million deaths through warfare, siege, displacement, and demographic collapse. Before the age of industrial war, and before modern nation-states, one leader forged the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Number 2. Genghis Khan. During the mid-20th century, China underwent sweeping economic and social transformation through centralized state campaigns that reshaped agriculture, industry, and rural life across a vast population. Large-scale collectivization and rapid policy shifts disrupted traditional farming systems and food distribution on a national scale. The Great Leap Forward and subsequent policies led to widespread famine, economic dislocation, and prolonged societal strain as production targets and state directives overrode local agricultural realities. Historians estimate policies under this leadership contributed to about 30 to 45 million deaths through famine-related conditions, economic mismanagement, and systemic policy failures. Number 1. Mao Zedong.